Okay, so assembly time. I've dry tested dry fit all the joints. They look like they're going to work pretty well for us. Nice tight fit, and just going to glue it together. Now this is just at the limits of the sort of thing I can build on my workbench. It's a skinny workbench. So I have a folding table I use for bigger cabinets. Sometimes I just got to do them on the floor. But this I can do right here, so it's easy to show you. Make sure. One thing about MDF is it's kind of dusty sometimes. And sometimes if there's too much dust in the joint, it can mess stuff up. I'm just going to scrape some of that out. Okay. Do a thin bead of glue. A medium bead of glue. Normally, when you're gluing dados, you don't want a lot of squeeze out, because dados are one of the harder things to clean glue squeeze out from. But MDF tends to be pretty thirsty and suck the glue down. Of course, the trick is knowing how hard you can pound without breaking it. That, unfortunately, takes practice. And you bring up the other side. Everything's getting pretty flush, but if you have to choose, make sure that front piece is flush, because that's the front of the cabinet. And these are not blind dados, they go all the way through. You have 20 minutes before the glue sets. Take the time to do it right. Most pros would use a narrow crown stapler to finish this off. Even on finished woods, you can line them up with a grain and they're pretty invisible. I don't have one of those, so I'm just using, finish nails. About 3 per side is plenty. And this is a painted cabinet anyway, so we can spackle those holes and they will be utterly invisible. Trying to get away from me. Of course, you want to be kind of careful that you don't miss the shelf and blow out. Even pro cabinet makers get about 1 blowout per day when they're assembling. But it looks ugly. And it's one more thing you got to fill with putty. So take the extra minute and line everything up. And you can tell this is an MDF cabinet because it's already getting incredibly heavy. You should never carry nails in your mouth, it's dangerous. According to our friends at OSHA anyway. A former employer of mine tried to make me a safety inspector, and it didn't work out for some reason. I still remember some things. course, you don't want to nail these all the way in because it'll leave a dimple in the cabinet. You nail them just almost all the way in, then you come back later with the nail set. Seems obvious, but sometimes people don't know. Apprentices never used to know. Okay, so before it gets all dry and stuff, take a square. Make sure everything's pretty square. You'll still have one more chance to rack it square when you put the back panel in, but better just to keep everything square as you go. Okay, now we're going to cut some of our secondary wood. We're going to, usually for the toe kick we'd go all the way down, but in this case we have some wires and moldings and stuff that might pass through the bottom. So I'm going to take a 1x2 piece, goes, if you can see, goes right across the back of the toe area. And then a 1x4 piece, you see, okay, here, which is going to be our nailer, which is going to screw into the studs. And for the secondary wood and back, that's pretty much all we need. So I'm just going to measure and I'm going to cut those and I'll be right back. Okay, cut those pieces of secondary wood. That's why it's nice to have one vise just around the shop you can cut from. Thick one is the nailer, thin one is just that support for the back of the toe. Now, a lot of people pocket hole these to stick them in there. In fact, I do when I'm building plywood cabinets. Pocket screws don't hold really great in MDF, and I don't have a pocket machine, so it's a little slow, so I'm just going to nail these in. A little bit of glue and a couple more French nails. Don't want to over nail these because actually the glue is going to hold them in, especially with that long strip up against the shelf. The other thing is you want to hold them back just a little bit from the back panel, maybe like a 1/64 of an inch, so that the finished part is nice and flush up against the back panel. And these are just close. Okay, well, I've got it assembled to the point where the carcass is basically there. It's a frameless cabinet, obviously, so this is pretty much all there is. I still need to cut a toe panel in here. I didn't cut that out ahead of time because I wanted to be able to measure it pretty precisely. And then while I'm doing that, I'll go ahead and do the drawer front, which of course is not going to come exactly up to it. It's actually going to be about 1/8 of an inch shorter. This is also a good time to check those top pieces, make sure they really fit. So I'm just going to go to the table saw and do that. You can't see, it's off camera, but the other nightstand is just as far along as this one. So I'm building them together. That's usually a good idea when you're building two of the same thing, so that you can make sure everything matches as you go. You don't get too different. So I'm going to go ahead and get that drawer front and toe panel, and I'll probably go ahead and measure the back panel at this time, cut it out, but not install it yet. So I got the toes in, and I got the drawer fronts cut out. We'll set those aside for now. Just wanted to get them now because this is the easiest time to measure them. Now, I want to go on record as saying I don't like flush toes, especially not on a cabinet that's going to be a work surface. You really need a toe that's, well, has space for your toes. But even on something like this that isn't, I don't like the look as well. However, in this case, I was matching some existing built-ins in the room, and I thought it was more important for it to match. But that's there. However, the next thing we have to do before we go forward is really flush up the front of this cabinet. Now, it's common in the trade to use a belt sander. I often do, but these are pretty close. So I'm just going to use my little orbital sander. with a 100 grit disc. And just make sure this stuff is flush because we're going to put a round over on there, and the round over will skip if everything doesn't line up. Okay, so now we're in the phase which most cabinet shops call detail. Usually the guy standing there doing detail is like a senior apprentice. Probably he's already done a turn as a sander and an assembler and maybe building face frames. And then they think he's steady enough he can start doing detail. But that's where you put on all the little roundovers and things, which you can't really do ahead of time. You got to wait till the cabinet's assembled. In this case, because we're matching some existing cabinets, there's going to be a roundover on the outside edge, but also the inside edge of the cabinet. That's really popular in 50s houses. I think because that's about the time when routers first got affordable for the average carpenter. So prior to that, roundovers had been a very labor-intensive thing. You had to use files and hand planes, and then after that, everyone had small routers, and roundovers got really easy. Now, the thing to be really careful of, though, is the part that matches up with the drawer can't have a roundover, otherwise it's going to look totally strange. So, I don't know if you can see, but I made marks where I'm going to stop that roundover, and I've got to just kind of sneak up to it. So, been a while since I did that. Let's hope for the best. Back when I was an apprentice, I got to take apart a couple cabinets because I overshot the mark and put new panels on. So I know how to do it, but let's hope it doesn't happen today. Got my trusty little fixed-based router. You don't want a huge router for this work. Usually these little one-horse routers are just the ticket. And remember, on the inside, always work clockwise. Yeah, because that way it's not going to kick as bad. It's pretty good. So, yeah, that's pretty good. Only 3 to go. But I've got a lot of rounding to do. Okay, I got those roundovers on. They look pretty good. The next thing we need to do before we go too much further is get the cabinet side drawer guides in. I'm just going to zoom in. The one that looks like that, it's sort of wider on the end, is the one that goes in the cabinet. Now, you can get these at any home improvement or hardware store. And I'm kind of surprised they actually come with instructions. As far as I know, have never read these instructions before. And I can see why, because they're actually like mixing up metric and imperial dimensions, and translation doesn't seem great. So, well, that's nice though. The important thing with these is that you get them lined up the same on each side. Okay? So, from what I can make of the instructions, it should be 5/64 in. About like that. Use your combo square, set it to the right depth, and then use it for all 4 drawer guides. And then they're supposed to go about 1/4 inch above that stop line, which would be 1/4 inch above the opening. Yep, looks pretty good. They come with these tiny little screws. You want to start them with your awl, just so they line up right. Okay. Careful not to strip them. Okay. And then I don't want to reset my combo square. So I'll just grab one of my other squares and I'll just make sure, just by eye really, Yeah, it's pretty square. Looks haphazard, but when I was building, 6 kitchens a day for the mobile home industry, this is about how I did it. And I had a lot of complaints about other stuff, but never about my drawer guides. So I think this is pretty adequate. So it's just like that. Put 2 or 3 screws in each, and you're good to go to move on. Okay, drawer guides in, and we need to deal with these tops. Now, obviously in practice, a lot of cabinets get countertops, which is almost a whole different trade. And we'll do some real countertops here later in the channel. But for right now, these are nightstands, and they get ordinary MDF tops. Now, I just fit these. Looks like they're fitting pretty well. But while they're on here, I want to mark all of the details, which in this case is just roundovers. But we're going to have to round the front 2 corners, 1/4 inch, so they match up with the case. So I'm going to draw a roundy thing, 1/4. It's amazing how many fewer mistakes you make if you just take a minute to write everything on the board. Then the front edge gets a 3/4 round over, and I'm going to check. Yep. This is the one that's finished both sides, so that gets a 3/4 on either side. Okay. Mark that. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but you get the picture, right? It's a marking all the stuff on the board. This one's only finished on one side, so that gets nothing but this corner gets 1/4, and the front edge 3/4, and that side that gets finished gets a 3/4. Okay. So now the thing about a 3/4 inch roundover is you can't really do it with a handheld router. Because the board's 3/4 inch wide, so there's nothing for the pivot bearing to write on. But luckily we have the router table, so we're going to go back there and cut those 3/4 inch routers with that. But we will do the 1/4 inch here because we already have that router set up, and we'll get that over with. So we're right here. Let's go ahead and cut those 3/4 inch. Then onto the router table. So basically a very similar setup to last time, except now we have a 3/4 inch roundover bit in there. I'm using a full 2x4 to space it away from the fence because I really don't want to chew up my new fence. So I'm just going to take that and I'm going to put those roundovers on the panels. So here we go. I've got the tops nailed on. All you need is about 4 little finish nails to stick them on there while the glue sets. Some little dings and rough edges here, but we'll take care of all that when we go back to sand them. So I got the drawer fronts, I've got the back panels. Don't put the back panels on until after you sand. It's way easier to sand if you don't do that. But what we don't have yet is drawers. So the next thing we need to work on is to make some drawer boxes to go into these. Well, this week I showed you how to assemble cabinets. Next week I'll show you a foolproof way to make dovetail drawers on the table saw. So don't miss that. See you then.